Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's ITSM Community Webcast. My name is Jim Blaney on the ITSM Product Marketing Team. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to take a look at IT asset management and share with you a few tips and tricks on how to successfully manage your hardware assets with CA's IT Asset Manager. We'll take a look at some of the key capabilities and features of IT Asset Manager and Asset Portfolio Management, as well as take a look at a few of the use cases on how those capabilities can be applied to real-world scenarios and help you out. The session is going to be presented by our own Kim Rasmussen from Engineering Services here at CA. One last thing before we get started, we will be taking questions at the end. Feel free to use the Q&A feature on the WebEx. And so with that, I will hand things over to Kim. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Jim. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this short presentation. It will be, as Jim was saying, a mix between both technology and products and processes. So I'll give you an overall guidelines and tips and tricks, as we're saying, to the whole area of IT asset management. We're going to focus on hardware asset management today. Mainly asset portfolio manager, but of course we can't talk about asset management without talking a little about software. But that's going to be at a minimum. If you have questions at the end on software, we are happy to answer those questions as well. So the whole idea of why we want to do asset management is that we want to make sure that we get, we have our optimize all our spendings in the IT department. One of the biggest problems is that it is a very, very big budget that is being spent on IT equipment and software, and we need to have a better transparency on how it's being used and make sure that we get the right bang for the buck, if you like. I always say that it's the first two rules that you need to do is you need to make sure that everything that you purchase, everything that is getting in through the procurement system has to have a business purpose, right? If you buy something that has no business purpose, that is not supporting your actual business in your company, being oil refinery that's producing petrol, or being a school that is supporting a training environment, or anything, it has to be your core business that is being supported. So therefore, anything that you do has to be doing, be in that business. And also, we have this, saying that you need to own what you use, and you need to use what you own. And typically, the first thing we want to make sure of when we have to talk about software is that we, want to be into compliance. And it's the same thing with the hardware here. Obviously, there's not many people that will give you new laptops and anything if you don't pay for it. So it's not a big thing, but it's very important that we have that balance, so we don't have something that is not being used, or just sitting idle on the shelf. But it's also we need to make sure that we buy the right stuff, right? So that's all about this optimization that we've been talking about a lot. Just a quick touch on the whole software asset and why we need to look at hardware and not software today. Hardware is the foundation. Hardware asset management is the foundation of any good hardware asset management practice. You are unable to do a proper job in software asset management if you're not doing a proper job at hardware asset management. You don't know what machines you own, what configuration they are, where they're sitting. You will not be able to do things like site licenses or virtualization, impact on your different licenses. So even though software asset management typically is the more sexier thing, hardware asset management is actually the foundation and the most important thing in my mind, and you should start there. And if you do a good job at hardware, you can save in both ends. And obviously, the highest risk of compliance is not so much hardware. As I was saying, people don't give you stuff for free, but software for somehow can't get into the operations without being properly purchased. So there's obviously a lot of things that you need to be aware of, and just doing hardware asset management just doesn't cut it today. But hardware asset management is the foundation. And the key to doing good hardware asset management is always about your data quality. And it's actually in most of the management disciplines that we do in service management, is that you need to have good quality of data. If you don't trust the input, how can you trust the output, right? If you don't trust the source of the data, how will you then, how can you then rely your business on the output and the processes and the reports? There's three good ways of getting better quality of data. The first thing is that you do processes around these things, making sure that if you change something, you have a process that then make it reflect into the system. You want to automate as much as you can. The more you automate, the more you know how the data gets in. So it's not only a matter of the actual content of the data, but it's also how the data is getting in there. A nightly run that imports all your new purchases from your procurement system or import all your inventory from your discovery tool, those are the places you should start. But there's a lot of other things that you can actually automate. And then you need to get your users engaged. Because typically the users, they hate doing manual work, as a lot of other people do. But if they can see a benefit of supporting this business, not because they have to, but because it will benefit them. Sometimes it's because it'll be easier for them to order things in the self-service portal. Sometimes it could be that you can have some proactive services saying, because you have this laptop, we can now replace it, within the next month or whatever. So all these things that makes them see the value of having this whole asset management. That's something that actually will improve the quality of the data, because everyone sees the value of the data, and therefore they will help you get the data. So I actually believe that user engagement is actually a key thing to the last 5–10% of your accuracy. The base is always the process and the automation, but it's the way you get from 85 to 95. That's where it's all about your users, and also the individual that do the move and receive the machines at the loading dock and everything. But so it's a matter of that they understand why the data is being used, because in a matter of fact, no people have the wrong intention, right? They always have good intention, but if they don't understand it, they don't see the value, they can get, and we all can, get sloppy or, unprecise or, anything, right? So get them engaged, tell them why it's good for them, and use the data so they can see a value, then you get much better data. So how do you implement these processes? And there's a couple of industries. The ITAM has a lot of both certifications. They're the industry leaders. I personally also are looking a lot to the British company called ITAM Review. They do a review. They started doing reviews of tools, but they actually doing a lot of things with their asset management, community and forums. They have this 12-box model that is free, and you can actually also get certified in that. It says later here, but they already have the certification in now, which means that it's a similar approach to what ITAM does. Similar approach, but I actually find it more precise, if you like. I'm not saying that the ITAM is bad. They've been in the industry for a long time. They absolutely know what they're doing. But I think the ITAM Review has a little more pragmatic entrance to this whole thing. Then obviously we have ITIL. ITIL is predominantly for configuration management, but there's a lot of other disciplines within the ITIL framework, and one of them is asset management. Asset management and the CMDB should not be seen as the same thing. They are working a lot with the same data. They have a big overlap, and in my personal opinion, asset management should be a provider of more or less 90% of all the data that the change manager needs. But in the matter of fact, the whole change management, the purpose of the change and configuration management is keeping things running. The whole thing about asset management is getting the best bang for the buck. You know, we're talking about this IT spending optimization, right? So they serve two separate purposes, but they're still very, very related. There's also, we also have a content pack. It's a little dated, so it's not something you can just put into the whole thing, but it actually gives you a good guideline, and it's a good place to lean on if you need to start building these processes. And I have a couple of slides from our ITIL best practices that we can show a little later, or that'll be showing throughout this presentation. You can also build your own. There's absolutely no way of starting from scratch with a blank piece of paper and start building processes, but there's been a lot of experiences and a lot of errors going into this. So all the things that is in these practices, being either the CA best practice or the ITIL or the ITAM reviews, I would say it's not wise not to at least lean on them, and then enrich your process, or adopt whatever you need, and then make the other things of your process in there, so you have it so it fits your company. I will say this: if you change a lot of processes in a company, it will take some training in the company, but sometimes it's actually worth the investment in training people. But just try to see that you do not have too, the less people you have influence in these processes, the more leaner implementation you'll get. And one thing that I'm always saying is, if you're putting in a new process, make sure that process is working and the data flows within that process before you start loading old data. Else you'll get this blind spot, or this gap between the new data and the old data, and you'll lose the management for that specific period. Okay, so these are some of the things that I will recommend you to be aware of. Now I'm going to go through three use cases, which is very, very standard ITAM processes. It's going to be about receive, it's going to be about the IMAC process, and then disposal. I'm going to first talk a little about the process, and then we talk a little about how we can utilize APM to do these things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the receive process. The receive process is the process where you've ordered something, and then you need to get that into your operation, and you need to get it installed, provisioned, so it actually starts producing that business purpose that is being acquired for. And one of the huge discussions when you start talking about this receive process is, when do you actually create your asset record? You can create it when it's ordered, or when it's confirmed, when it's shipped, received, or anything. It's actually, it's a discussion that it's actually one of my favorite discussions. So bear with me if I link a little too long here. I'll try to keep my time here. Don't worry. So the whole idea here is you obviously have your first process, your request. So user go and request it. It's being approved by the manager, and it's technical approval. And that could be where you create the asset. You could also create it through the fulfillment. Find out, is there an asset already? If you don't have an asset, you go order it. You wait for it to be shipped, and then when you receive it, then it's being back to the availability check, and then obviously you get it. Once it's in the warehouse, you get it provisioned, you get it inventoried, you close the change order from the order that was done with the request, and then everything is up and running and is serving that business purpose. And obviously, this is where this whole process is where the device or the whatever resource you've been purchased, this is where that serves the business purpose, and you want to keep it as long in that process as possible. But where do you want to create the assets? So I have a pros and cons of all these things just in a minute in the slides, but what I typically say it should be somewhere around this area, right? That's what we think is the right place. If you want to create it through your request, there's absolutely no problem there. Just think about what that will impact if there's changes in the data. Because the whole point here is to make sure that you get your system, your equipment ordered, and you will be able to reconcile it against what you're supposed to get, what you got, what is out installed, and everything. So you need to, first of all, manage your ownership records, but you also need to have some sort of a system that allow you to validate that you have it running in the system, that you received it, that you're paying the right thing in your on the bills, right? So let's talk a little about the pros and cons in the different settings. So obviously, if you create the asset at order time, so when I go and order a new laptop, press request, then that means that I will be able to track the full life of that. The problem is that there might be changes along the line to what laptop I'll be given if I will be, if it even would be approved, right? It could be that you will be getting 10 laptops in because it was cheaper to buy a bulk instead of just getting one laptop in, right? So I'm not saying that this is wrong. I'm just saying that those are some of the things where I think that the process and the data is a little immature to when you get it. This is actually our recommended place, but I'll come back to that. So we can also create the asset based on what the vendor is confirming that they'll be shipping to us, right? So the vendor sees when we ordered, they find out, we don't have these, but they're going to give us another type of laptops, which are a little better spec to the same price because they don't have everything and something else on stock. And there again, the data changes, right? So what we want to do is we want to take whatever they say they will send to us, and then we want to put it into the system. Typically, you can, and this is typically a paid-for service, but you can get what we refer to as an advanced shipping notice on ASN, which will be a digital file, typically a CSV file that you get from the vendor saying this is what we're going to send you. And then you use your receive process to validate that you got whatever's being shipped. Now, it could be that they don't ship everything that is on the piece of paper, but typically they will be using that list of what they will shipping, the shipping list, if you want. They will use that as the basis for their invoice, right? So you'll probably be paying for everything that was supposed to be shipped. But if it's not there, well, then you need to you need to go back. But the fact here is that you can use your receive process to find those things that was not shipped the right way. One of the problems is that there is no standard for ASN. This is every single vendor will give you a new format, and we have had our share of challenges with trying to get these things to work. Also, some of the specific company attributes like the barcode and the username and the asset name might not be part of that company. Again, many of the companies will gladly take your money in order to add these things to the build, and more and more companies are now using services where the machines are provisioned at the vendor side. They have been, giving the right names, the right asset tags and everything, the right image, and being sent directly to the user instead of through the IT department as it was 10 years ago. So some of these things are getting more and more into the natural process of also the different suppliers of hardware out there in the field. We can register it at receive time. The pro here is that you only receive what you get into the door. It's really a physical, you see a box, you register it, that's it, super easy. The problem is that because, as I said before, typically what the shipping list from the vendor will be the list of what they expect to send, then you cannot reconcile if you're not sent everything, right? Also, it requires more training, and it opens up access to some of the key values. Typing in password. Sorry, not no. Typing in serial numbers and barcodes and those type of things. So while they're not bad in doing in the receive process, I would say that if you can get it in the vendor confirmation, then that will be better. The next thing, and this is actually also a very, very popular place to do it, is that we create it when we first inventory the system. This is the most easiest way to get the data. The good thing is that you obviously just create it right out of your inventory repository. CA IT as a manager does have capabilities in the reconciliation process to create these assets as well, and there's no problem there. It's super easy. The thing is that you again do not catch the things that was delivered but not put into use. You sometimes and you also will miss the crucial business information, like the location, the status, what is the user that is on that machine. Some of the things can be discovered, some of the things can be guessed based on IP addresses and stuff like that. But you need to have some level of extra work to be done in the first time. But again, this is a very popular place to do it. I personally, I recommend to see if you can set up a system that is based on an ASN, so that you have all the information being typed in by the user, and the more, the vendor, and the more you can get the vendor to type in and verify, the better your data will be at the get-go. And then you use some sort of a barcode scanner or something when you receive it, so you just read it as a machine, so no one needs to type it. Again, no people has bad intent, but we know about fat fingers. We know about if people need to do the same thing repeatedly, they get sloppy. And I'm the worst of the bunch. But that's the whole thing, right? We need to automate as much as we can. If we already have the data somewhere available, we just pass that along instead of having someone else typing it in. And then you have your order number, you have your different informations, order number or your purchase number and stuff like that, to tie these orders together, to tie it back to the original order and the purchase, right? If you choose to add your assets through the reconciliation, it's important that you have a special flag. So if you, for instance, have your normal working status being active, then have something called active no business data or need attention or something like that. So you set a status of anything that you create from discovery, so you know that you need attention for this to assign all your business data, right? And then you can once a week find out if there's anything that needs to be attended. And also you can use your reconciliation process to make sure that anything you bought will be out there, doing some sort of a purpose in the network. Let's talk a little about that in the tool. So ASN report. This is actually a report that I anonymized from, but this is something that we could have had from CA. We have the number, how many, what number it was on the purchase order, what it was of you bought and everything. And you can see some of it is services, and some of this is other things. So in this case, you also need to, look at the ASN and then see what it is that you actually need to import, right? In this case, you will probably only import the laptops, right? You could argue that you also will import the 60-inch ultra high def television, but in this case, we will do the laptops, right? And then you actually use the importer, which then allows you to map the different fields here. In the CSV file, you load the file, and then it's basically just use that file to get it in, and it'll then load it in, and it'll import it. This information can always also be scheduled, so that you can have it. You just dump the files that you get from your vendors into a certain folder, and then it'll just be imported. And remember to set them. See how we set here The status, we set that on order. So we know that everything that is on order will be the things that we check for in the loading dock whenever boxes arrive from the manufacturer or vendor. Another thing that we recommend you to look at is to scale down the UI. In this case, I don't know if, for those of you that know asset portfolio management, but you can see that this is, only like a fraction of all the fields that is available. This is an example where you have the guys at the loading dock only will be able to type in, the barcode, and the serial number, and small things when they register it, and then the status, and that's it, right? Again, I don't believe that people have bad intent, but if you start locking down the GUI so they only can access the things that they should work with, they will know what to do about the fields, and they won't, by accident put in things on the wrong fields or something like that, right? So I'm not saying that we should scale it down because we don't trust people. It's actually to help them only do whatever they need to do. Third thing we talked about was also the reconciliation, and this is where you can actually set it up so you can, create or add to ownership repository, right? And that will then allow you to create the models. You can see here that you can set an asset status, and in this case we say temporary active. That means that that's a flag saying there's something that needs to happen here before it is, a fully fleshed record in the system. Lastly, you can do the report as part of the report that ships with Asset Portfolio Manager. You can get a report of which discovered assets is not found in your owned asset. So you can find out which machines that is out there that you don't have an idea of where it came from, and the other way around. There's also a report that will tell you what you purchased that is not out there. So you basically can see what you own. You can ensure that you own what you use and use what you own. The next process here, let's see, half an hour. Good. The next process here is about relocating the asset. So the ongoing process for an asset is typically, when we call it the IMAC process, install, move, add, change, and it's basically when you move it to another machine, another location, move it to another user, or move it to another purpose, right? So it's the production process of an asset, if you like. This is where the asset obviously should stay the longest because you want to get the most out of whatever you purchased, right? So typically, the IMAC process takes care of your location, organization, status, and user links. And these are the links that actually is very key to software asset management. If you have named user licenses, if you have site licenses for special locations or for special part of the organization, you need to know these type of things. And then you can also, you should have, for each of the different steps in your process, you should have a status, right? So you can say, now I went from receive to warehouse, and then from the warehouse to the user, and then I get from the user to reimage, and then to the new user, and then disposal or out for repair, whatever, right? So it's very important that you keep a set, not too many, but you keep a set of statuses that allow you to control and also look at the life cycle of that machine, right? So you will be able to look at the device saying, okay, how many times have our Dell laptops been at repair in over a 3-year period, right? And it'll be easy just to see from there on your repair status and how long term they were in status and all, right? So keep a handful of good statuses in your IMAC process that controls whenever there's a change in the life cycle, so you can start using that data when you need to purchase new equipment, right? Many of these things could be done as self-service, or you can have people that move things around. In old days, it was very common. There was a technical people that will unplug your machine, move it, and put it in a new place. But more and more, this comes into a self-service portal. And the more it's in a self-service portal, bear in mind that that's about training, right? The IT people, it's their job, it's their training to do these things. Also part of that, filling in the data. If this is people that is not, if they're the accountants or developers or manufacturing, controllers in the manufacturing line, they need to have a strict, specific, foolproof ways of typing in the right data. Again, I want to stress here, none of us think that people have bad intention, but if we make it hard to type it in, it will be more likely that they will type in the wrong thing, not by intention, but just because they don't know better, right? So it's very important that you think about these things. If you do a questionnaire to a user, make sure that it's not ambiguous. If you do a questionnaire to a user about a location, have one field that he changed, not 15 fields, right? So do it by template, do it by predefined fields or whatever. And obviously, you can also have things that triggers based on attributes that are changing, new user logging onto the machine, new IP range on the machine, and so on and so forth. Now, you might probably think that I will say, oh yeah, but this needs to be controlled by in Asset Portfolio Manager. Well, it could, and there's nothing wrong in doing it there, but most of your things are controlled by your service desk. So if you have service desk and you have it integrated with ITSM Manager, you can use your service desk integration to use change orders and change the different because you actually have a field here. See the ITAM field here on your configuration item. So when you have a change order saying you need to move this machine from this place to this place, and then they attach that CI to that change order, you will actually be able, as a technician, to change the different information on here, right? Same thing goes with which we call it a mobile interface. Yes, it's just a web interface on an iPad, but this again is a scaled down interface, so you only give it access to the things that you need. Again, the guys walking the floors, helping moving the things, and register the things right away. There are other ways of doing this as well. We have partners that help us to do with the barcode scanning and manual audits, and barcodes is, in my mind, still the best way to communicate between human intervention and computers when you need to ensure that things are the right way. But obviously, you need to generate these in the right way as well. Okay. The next thing is about automation here. Here's an example where if you have a location that change, then you will get a notification email to some sort of a super user or someone that tells you about the location has been changed. And this could also trigger other information. In this case, it's just an email that's being sent from process automation or ITPAM. But it could be anything else that you can trigger. And you can even say that, oh yeah, my location is good enough if it's just based off the IP address. But then don't expect too good data for people that travels, right? Because they'll be traveling around and they'll be changing IP addresses. So, there's things you can do, and there's things you should be considering. You could guess a lot from all the attributes that you discover on your machines, but you also need to make sure that you don't mess up your different other data if you rely on that data for doing chargeback or for doing licensing for it. Let's talk a little about the retiring of assets. One thing that not everyone have too much of a process to is the whole retirement of an asset, or disposal, as we also call it. Once an asset is being seen as not being fit for the business anymore, you need to get rid of it, right? And there's various reasons why you need to get rid of it. To record that. Obviously, you need to prove that you had the asset and no longer have it. You want to retain history for vendor management, so if you found that you had machines that you need to retire earlier because they were not good enough, then you might not want to buy these anymore. And then you want to make sure that you do the proper disposal. There's a couple of aspects to this. The first thing is about the company data, right? I don't know if you heard about the manufacturer, the Xerox manufacturers that got back the Xeroxes, and then they were not moved. There were hard drives on the Xerox machines that had a copy of every single copy that were made in the lifetime of that machines. If those are not destroyed and deleted, then you sit there with data that just, secret data that should not go out there, right? Very vulnerable data. So make sure that there's no company data that gets out that way. Some company actually take out their hard drive, so when they deliver back machines, they don't deliver back the hard drive. So they make sure that there's nothing there. There's safe ways of doing it, and there's actually companies that live by doing these destructions. There's also a company that got fined because they didn't do a good job in it. But again, you need to trust whatever partner you should select to do this. And then also make sure that you take off things like the barcode and any label that will point back to you. Because if whoever buys the machine and takes over the equipment does not dispose of it correctly, then you'll end up being your name on a computer that is on a beach somewhere in Bangladesh not being disposed of correctly, right? And that'll be in the news, and it'll be you. Even though you did the right thing and you can prove it, it'll still be your label that is being on the television, right? So it's very important that you think about all these things, not only making sure that you get the machine out of commission and don't pay anything, for your maintenance and all the things, but also make sure that nothing happens with both the data and the machines that can hurt your reputation and your brand as a company. So one thing is that we need to look into the whole unlinking. So you should have a process that says, okay, if I'm disposing this or retiring this asset, then I should unlink it from my inventory. I should delete it in my inventory, and then so that you don't have any record of it anymore. And the reason why we also should delete it in the inventory is that some of that inventory actually also is basis for your software asset calculations, right? And the other thing is that you can now use the same report that we used before to find out if there's devices that was not bought, to see if they reappear, so they were not properly, disposed of. Again, we have to have all these measures to ensure and to validate that our processes are correctly done, so we know how your equipments and your spendings are handled. So here's a report again that finds machines that is not in. All right. Last couple of slides is all about I call it succeeding as an asset manager. One of the things that we see in the field is that the people that does asset management does a fantastic job, but they forget to show off. And when I'm saying show off, I mean you should not just control the asset because you have to. There's a very, very big business reason why you do this, right? So you should go and you should prove that you've done good work. You should go and show that this is what you need. If there's a question about, do we know which machine will be hit by the WannaCry virus, you have that data. You should prove that you can produce that data, and you can show that data within minutes instead of within days, right? So you have a big opportunity as an asset manager to actually support the business. And you should do that, because if you start doing that, you will get better you'll get better or easier funding. You get support. People will help you, and you will actually get this key position. And suddenly, from being a bean counter, excuse my French here, I'm not believing that asset management are bean counters, but being a bean counter to being a strategic person within that company. And there's too many people that does not see this. It is so important that you brag a little. I mean this. Not, you shouldn't be the guy that people don't want to talk to, but actually they think that it's cool that you can start, producing these information and help the company get into this. The other thing is that you need to get the right project sponsor, right? So you need to find the right funding, right? You need to have your C-level backing. But again, coming back to what I've just talked about, if you can prove your worth in having this data, you will very easy become a key person that people want to help and people want to be seen with, right? I'm seeing here typically in the CFO instead of the CTO organization, what we see is that asset management, unlike, for instance, the inventory system, say that's a supporting organization into the CFO. The good thing about the CFO is actually he got the money, right? But the CTO has all the data. So there is some work that needs to be done there. But it's important. Yeah, again, it's important that you just brag a little. Sorry. Yeah. Another thing is that if you show that you are proud of your work, people believe you, and that will also build credibility and trust around the data. So I know these are they seem very, very natural, but we just don't see people exploring these things enough. Because there is such a big thing to be helping the business. I'm not talking about yourself as a manager and bringing your shine, bringing you to shine, but it's the whole business that actually will benefit from it, right? So be critical of your work and understand your data. If you need to understand how you collect it, why you collected it, and by whom, where you get it, and who will use it, right? There needs to be a reason why you collect the data. If you don't have a reason, don't collect it, right? Obviously, you need to be careful that you just don't say, I don't need it today, but I need it tomorrow, and then just ignore it. But make sure that you know why you have the data. It's not just because it's cool to import metering data if you don't have a use for metering data, right? And then share your work, right? Share your work, share your work, share your work. All right. So in short, all I want to say is hardware asset management is not as boring as you think. If you make it your mission to provide good data based on the business, people will understand the importance of the data. Asset management data is valuable information for the business, strategy, and decision making. Make it easy to understand, easy to use, and automate as much as you can. Make the tool support your needs and not the other way around. I think that was all I had today. Should we open up for questions?
Yeah, Kim, fantastic. That's a lot of great information, tips, advice, I would say. So yeah, let's open things up for questions, and we can use the Q&A feature. Everyone who's on, if you do have a question for Kim, please use that. Submit that through the Q&A feature, and we'll get those answered. So Kim, we'll just give it like a couple seconds here.
Perfect.
Looks like we might have a few people actually typing in some questions.
Could you come in? It should please. Where's the Q&A? Is that the chat thing?
There's a Q&A question mark icon that's in the upper right-hand corner.
Oh, there you go.
Chris, it looks like folks are actually typing in, but Chris, do you actually see anything coming through?
I do. First question is, can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we'll be posting a PDF version of the presentation up to the community site when we post the recording. There's another question here from Brian. So the barcode that would be used is coming from the vendor, correct?
Preferably yes, because that barcode will then, it typically could be part of your asset tag. So you request, you do a deal with the vendor saying, okay, this is how I would like my asset tag to look, and I would like to have a barcode with this and this information in it. So ideally, it should come from the vendor, yes.
And it's not a question, but a comment from Vincent. Great job, very understanding and helped greatly. Therefore, no questions at the moment.
Thank you very much. Let me put up my if there's anyone that has a question, obviously we should take it off the community, but else you know, you can ask a question to me on an email, but we should keep it off the communities. Actually, I believe that's the right place, so everyone can see what it is that is being asked. Right? I believe more could benefit from that. So let's keep it to the communities. You know, where also we will be posting the presentation. Oh, Brian says he's talking. Is that?
Yeah, Brian. You can either type your question, if you have a further question, into the Q&A, you can type it there, or if you want to unmute your line, you can. That would be #6 on your phone. Again, #6 would unmute your phone line. I'm not sure if we got anything more for Brian, but Jim and Kim, that looks like it's it for the Q&A at this point.
Fantastic. I guess, you know, if Brian, if you do have questions, you can reach out to Kim directly to get those answered. Kim, I'd like to say thank you. Fantastic presentation, a lot of great content. Hopefully, those of you that are on the webcast, go to the community and download the presentation. There's a lot of great insight and information specifically around ITAM and kind of a better understanding. I think you really kind of presented the problems, the challenges, and kind of how to overcome some of those challenges that we all kind of face from an ITAM standpoint. So fantastic. We will be having another webcast next month, and look forward to seeing you all there. And Kim, any last comments before we jump off?
No, not really. Thank you for spending the time with me.
Great. Chris, thank you. Appreciate it. And everyone else, have a great rest of your day, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks, everyone.